Welcome to Life with Angel YouTube channel. Thanks so much for listening and tuning in. Remember to give a thumbs up if you like it and subscribe. So, for those of you who know, I've had 3 children so far, but only 2 pregnancies because I had twins my first time around. So with the twins, we had been married for about 6 weeks when I found out that I was pregnant. It was definitely a surprise. The funny thing is, David used to say he wanted to wait around 3 years to have our first, and I wanted to wait 1 year to have our first, and God gave us something we didn't expect. We got pregnant super fast. And so the first part of my pregnancy, I remember thinking, gosh, this seems hard. I feel like I'm so much bigger and I'm experiencing back pains and people around me that are pregnant aren't. What's going on? I guess I'm just not as tough as these other women are. So it's kind of funny. And then, but everything was going normally as far as I was growing and I was having the typical symptoms of pregnancy. But then halfway through the pregnancy, we decided to have an ultrasound. And that's when we found out, lo and behold, we're having twins. So that was a big shock. I was 21 weeks pregnant when we found out that I was having twins for my first experience. And now, of course, since I've had babies, I would know if I had more than one at the same time. But because it was my first experience, I didn't know what to expect. So that was a big shocker, and we had to kind of mentally prepare ourselves. And then we found out 2 boys, and that was scary because boys can be handfuls. So that was a thrilling, scary, exciting time for us. So at first we were planning on having a home birth my first time around with a midwife, but when we found out that I was going to have twins my first time around, the midwife was more comfortable if I went ahead and had my babies in the hospital. So we had a hospital birth for my first pregnancy. And unfortunately, that didn't go so well for me. In my experience, now I want to pause this. If you are pregnant and you do want to have your baby in a hospital, you may not want to listen to the rest of this, because the worst thing that I could do for you is put ideas in your head to make you nervous. So if you're pregnant and you're already a little nervous, don't listen to this one. Skip to my next video, because the best thing you can do as a pregnant woman is to put your mind at ease and to trust yourself. With that said, I had a bad spiral of events happen from in my story. At 32 weeks, my babies dropped, and I could feel like, oh no, these babies want to come. We had to make some decisions. I went to go see my doctor, Dr. Bootstaylor, and he decided you need to go on bed rest right away. So I went on bed rest. And then a week later, he wanted me to have another checkup. So I went waddling in. I was 33 weeks then. And at this point, the boys would most likely be safe outside of my womb, but at the same time, it's always best if they can grow inside of your womb. So we wanted to have the babies in as long as possible. I went waddling back to the doctor, and he gave me the suggestion that I should go on a medication. Now, my family, we prefer not to use medications as a first resort. We choose to use it as a last resort. And we had to weigh the pros and the cons, and for me and my husband, we decided that the best thing we could do for the boys was to have them in me as long as possible. So I went on this medication. It was actually 2 different medications. One I could only take for a couple of days because it was so strong. And the goal of it was to stop the contractions so that the birthing process would pause. So I took that, and I went on very strict bed rest. From 32 weeks on, I was only allowed to go waddle to the bathroom, and that was it. I had to stay in bed. And at the time, it was horrible. It was a month of being in bed, and I was pretty much reading, talking on the phone, sleeping, watching Netflix, and feeling sorry for myself as my husband did everything. He had to do his work plus my work, and I felt guilty about that. And I remember Mom saying, you need to rest, Angel, enjoy this time to sleep. And I remember thinking, oh, you don't even know what you're talking about. You're crazy. This is horrible. And as if any of you who are moms now, you know, oh my goodness, if I could just sleep and stay in bed for a month, oh my goodness, that'd be amazing. So the grass is always greener on the other side. So anyways, I stayed in bed, and then when I turned 36 weeks is when I decided to stop taking the medication. And I was hoping my body would wait 1 more week for 37, but it didn't. The next like that night, the night after I stopped taking the medication, is when my water broke and when my contractions began. So we didn't know what we were doing. We were new at this, and I was more in a fear mode instead of a relaxed, calm mode. And so I was in a fear mode, and I was scared that my water had broken. Uh-oh, what if bacteria come? So we need to rush to the hospital now. So we rushed to the hospital right away, which that's a mistake that I wouldn't suggest that you make. I think it's best to wait until you're in more active labor to go to the hospital. So we went to the hospital, and then they hooked me up overnight in a triage room, they called it, but they had me hooked up to the monitor and all these things that I didn't want. I wanted to sleep. I felt like the best thing, because I wasn't in active labor. I had just barely begun the process. But unfortunately, I was up all night being prodded and had these tests done that were more for liability and protocol for the hospital, not because I wanted it done. And when I also when I got to the hospital, there was a couple stressful things that were going on that I found out in my personal life. So that was not creating the right headspace. So one thing you can do proactively is make sure your mind is in the right place with low stress. And I had this plan to have a doula, and that didn't work out. I had someone that was a kind person in my life that volunteered, but she had a day job, and so she had to tend to her job, and we didn't realize the babies would come at the time that they came. So it's probably best if you pay money to someone, and that's their job as far as a doula goes. And my midwife didn't show up at the time. We had hired, we had Dr. Bootstaylor, and unfortunately, my midwife didn't come until it was time for the pushing. So all night long, I was needing help, and I didn't get the help that I needed. The hospital had said that I could have a birthing tub, or not. They said that I couldn't birth in the tub, but that I could labor in the tub. And unfortunately, when I arrived, they said, never mind, you're 2 days shy of where you have to be. You're not allowed to use a bathtub. And so all these things were kind of playing against me. Even the silly thing, like we couldn't find my essential oils that we thought we had packed. So all these things were just going crazy. But I think the biggest thing is my mind wasn't in the right place, and I didn't know how to relax my body. And I also didn't know how to advocate for myself very well. I had this beautiful birthing plan, but at the same time, there wasn't necessarily we didn't anticipate some of these things to happen. And so we weren't as quick to think on our feet. We were just kind of like, what are we doing? So for me, it was crazy. It was the hardest day of my life, for sure. It was very miserable. And again, if you are pregnant, don't listen to this. Listen to this later if you're curious, okay? Because I don't want to scare you, because I've had a really great birthing experience too, and you can too. But at the time, I literally thought I was dying. I thought it was the most unbearable, worst, intense pain that I'd ever experienced, and I vomited, and I didn't think I could make it. And then I had a nurse that wasn't very supportive, and she was kind of antagonistic towards someone who wanted a more natural birth, which was my goal. And so it was just it was a setup for failure. And she measured me more often than I probably should have been measured. And at one point she was like, oh, you're only 4 centimeters. You still have such and such hours left. And when she said that, my heart sank, and I felt, I can't do this anymore. And I wanted to quit. And I was asking for anything to help me, because I just wanted to make it through. I just didn't think I could do it. I felt defeated. And I ended up asking for, I was screaming. I was crazy, out of control. So I ended up screaming for an epidural, and that was a bad experience too. It took a very long time for them to come. And when they did come, they weren't very respectful to me. One guy was talking on the phone while he was about to inject my back with an epidural. And I was like, can you please focus on me? Because when someone's about to put something in your spine, that could kind of paralyze you if it goes wrong. So I wanted all the attention on me in that moment. So that was a negative experience, and the nurse was rude, and it was just like, it was really a really bad experience. But thankfully, when it was time for the babies to come and my body, the epidural did calm me down for probably 30 minutes. I was able to relax and calm, and then thankfully I was still able to push. at the end. I don't think it took its full effect in me, and so I was able to still assist in the process of birthing, so that was really good. And the midwife did a good job as far as helping to navigate and help me to push at the right times. Dr. Bootstaylor was in the room. He was a source of inspiration. Oh my goodness, when he walked in, it was just like this calm energy in the room. And thankfully, the nurses switched shifts. So I got a new nurse right at that right time, and she was awesome, and she was so sweet, and she was really helpful in me in the birthing process. She even thought to get a mirror because I was about to give up hope when I was trying to push David out, little David, and she got a mirror. She's like, see, this is his head. He's really coming. You got this. And so having a great nurse made a big difference for me. So I delivered little David, and then I got to hold him. And then I delivered Joshua, and I got to hold them, and I sang to them, Jesus loves me. And it was a beautiful experience. But then they wanted to whisk them away to the NICU. So my husband's job was to follow them because we don't want to vaccinate. We don't believe that it's the best thing for our children, and we do believe in a parent's having the right to make the call for their children. So we wanted to make sure that they did what we felt was best for our children, especially with the Hep B on day 1. They usually give that right away. And with the Hep B shot, I'm not going to dig deep into it, but it has a lot of things that are bad for little babies, and it's a sexually transmitted disease. And so we believe that there's really no benefits and there's all risk. And so if that's something that you want to look further into, I would encourage you to look into that. It has high amounts of aluminum, and the baby at day 1 is not yet able to do what it needs to process out the toxic load. And it's a lot higher of a toxic load than anyone should have at any one given time. And in addition to that, it's unless mama has that disease, then it's not something that a baby can get unless no one can get it unless they're sexually active or using needles. So anyways, we wanted my husband to follow the babies around just to make sure that the doctors were following our orders as parents. And we really advocate medical freedom and the idea that we are parents, and as long as you're good parents, as long as you're not, as long as you're a good person, which most parents are, then it's best for just the parents to make the call for what should or should not go into their children's bodies. So that's, I diverged. So let me go back to the birth story. My husband left and followed the boys, and my mom was with me, and unfortunately, I started to hemorrhage, and so they gave me Pitocin, which, again, we believe that there's a time and a place for medical intervention, and in this case, we thought that was the best thing to help my hemorrhaging stop and to help me calm down. But man, I was a mess. Between all the drugs that were in my system at that point, I remember trying to get up and pee, and they're like, no, you can't yet. When I finally was able to get up, I bonked my head because I was so out of it. It was crazy. But thankfully, everything ended up fine. The boys did have to go to the NICU a couple days just to make sure they were okay in protocol. That was also a difficult experience because we really had to fight hard to be able to get them out of the NICU. They made us watch a video and do a test, and they made us fill out questionnaires and prove that I could do this and that. It was hard. It was very hard and very draining, but we made it through. So if you ever do have an experience in the hospital that feels stressful, I would encourage you to hire someone to help you with nursing, because it is important for the nursing to start right away if you do plan on nursing, and get a doula, someone that can advocate on your behalf, and you don't have to fight, and you don't have to try to control your own situation, someone that will fight on your behalf. And one thing just with Dr. Bootstaylor, even though the midwife didn't show up, he came in the next day with tears in his eyes and with a different midwife, and they were so apologetic, and they ended up letting that midwife go because of her not being there for me in the time that I needed her. So I have nothing but high regards for my Dr. Bootstaylor, and I had a wonderful experience with him. Unfortunately, just not that particular midwife, but I love C-Baby midwifery and C-Baby the office as well. Anyways, that's kind of my story. We went home on day 3, after being in the NICU or staying at the hospital and having the boys be in the NICU, we were able to take them home. And then we got home and life was crazy because we had twins, but we managed and we survived. So I've had different experiences. I've had one in a hospital and one at home. Another option that some of you may be interested in is a natural birthing center, and that's sometimes good for people who are a little bit too nervous to have a baby at home but want a little more freedom and a little bit more of a natural approach than what they could have in the hospital. So look and see if there's any natural any birthing centers nearby where you live. There is one in Atlanta I know that I looked into. The biggest thing in your birthing experience is, where do you feel most comfortable? Where do you feel like you will be most calm? And where do you feel like you're gonna feel the least amount of stress? There's really no right or wrong place. So with my birthing stories, I've had 2 in the hospital and 1 at home. And I think you could have a great experience in the hospital if you set yourself up for success. So the biggest things I would encourage you are, make sure that you have a team prepared to be there for you and to advocate for you. And make sure you have backup plans in case things don't go according to how you expect that they would. Just have the right mindset is the biggest thing. No matter where you are, being prepared mentally is the biggest thing in anyone's birthing journey, is just to be ready. It's like my husband said, it's the Super Bowl, right? It's the biggest event that you can prepare yourself for. So it's very important to be relaxed. I hope that this video is helpful. I hope that it's informative and practical, that maybe some of these points you can relate on. Maybe you have some questions. Feel free to make comments below or ask questions below, and I'll do my best to respond. I send out positive energy to all of you. Thanks for listening, and I just pray that God blesses you, and you got this.